Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garrett Monroe. I'm the Sell-Side Director here at Calder. I am joined with one of our Chicago advisors, Shane Kissack. He's been with Calder since 2020. I thought it'd be great to have Shane on to ask him a couple of questions of what he's seeing in the market. Shane spends most of his time representing sellers and buyers, but specifically, we're going to talk about his sell-side activity today and a little bit about his Chicago efforts for Calder. So Shane, it's great to have you on the video today, and maybe we can just get rolling with telling us a little bit about yourself, background, and how you decided to join Calder.
Sure. Thanks for having me today, Garrett. My road to Calder is a little bit winding. I mean, I came out of university in the golf industry and worked in several different aspects until I landed at Calder in January 2020. I think one of the most important steps in my path here was starting, owning, operating, and then ultimately selling two of my own businesses. I started one business in 2004, another in 2007, sold one in 2012, the other in 2013. And that was really my first taste of kind of small business, lower market M&A. And ended up with some consulting gigs out of that, where I just decided I really enjoyed working with small business owners, and kind of the project-based nature of that work to kind of kept it fresh. And there was always a new challenge to attack. So then after a great conversation with Max, or a couple of conversations in 2019 with Max, ultimately decided that when I moved back to Chicago for my wife's career, it was the right time to kind of jump in with both feet with Calder and see if we could grow the Chicago market.
I like it. One follow-up question that I'm curious is, do you feel like you're one of the few advisors on our team that has, I would say, multiple past experiences with owning a business? Do you feel like that's helped your efforts in talking with business owners? Talk to us a little bit about how that's helped you in your career so far.
Yeah, it's been huge. And I always try to share that with business owners because, right, I'm a firm believer that there's two aspects to any deal, right? There's that financial aspect, of course, and what it means for maybe the owner's change of life or retirement. And then there's that emotional aspect, right? In some regards, it's like losing a family member if you sell a business, and kind of working through that and really able to be kind of sympathetic to both sides of it, and share with them what the realities are of selling your business. It's not the easiest thing you ever do. It's a tough decision. Doesn't happen overnight. So really trying to get in there and help them understand it's a process, but I'm sympathetic because I've been through it before, and I know it's, can often be one of the saddest and happiest days of your life when you sign on the dotted line.
Very true. Very true. So let's switch to your local market a little bit. Chicago, obviously known for a lot of M&A, investment banking, private equity activity. What do you believe are Calder's differentiators within your local market? And how has it helped you be competitive in the Chicagoland marketplace?
Sure. I mean, Chicago, as you know, is a dynamic market, right? There is, local and national players in business brokerage, investment banking. There's every level of sophistication. So I feel like one of the biggest things is I'm a very face-to-face business person. So being able, before we're even engaged or thinking about engaging, is having the opportunity to have a cup of coffee or a beer, honestly, with a business owner, and just listen to them, try to understand what their goals are, or maybe what they can't quite put words to. But because of my background, having sold, I kind of know what you're thinking about as you get to the process. So number one is just trying to be there for them and answer questions before they even have to make a decision about, am I really going to do this? What's the cost going to be? Is listening and sharing, and then offering to be a resource for them as they go down the path of decision making. It's not something, like you said, you can't flip a light switch on or do it overnight. So I think, that, along with Calder's ability with our essential services team of being able to really treat every deal like a boutique investment bank rather than a business broker, and really, white glove service, holding hands along the full step of the process, right? We just don't introduce them to to their buyer and say, good luck, hope you close, right? We're there holding their hand, setting up their deal team, interacting with their tax advisors, their attorneys, everyone that needs to be, part of the deal to get to a successful outcome.
Yeah, well said. I think it's definitely applicable to those, like, let's call it $2 to $50 million enterprise value businesses, the differentiator of wanting to be in person and then also have the full team of support when you bring the deal on. That was good. What's been your favorite deal so far? And maybe tell us a little bit about how that went for you and some of the stats or data that you learned throughout that process.
Sure. Yeah. One of my favorite deals was, actually a company right in my backyard that I wasn't even aware of. 5 minutes door to door from my house, CM Industries in Lake Zurich, Illinois. The owner there had interviewed, for lack of a better term, I think a lot of M&A advisors and just really hit it off and wanted to bring him a successful outcome. But, I knew that him going through a process was going to be a big deal. And he wasn't going to have the patience to meet with dozens of prospective buyers. Through that process, we vetted, I think in the neighborhood of 115, quality buyers. I knew I couldn't introduce them to more than maybe 3 or 4. So I really spent the time with those buyers and the owner kind of as their true intermediary, trying to understand, okay, who are going to be our, who are the sellers that we're going to spend, who are the buyers that we should spend the most time with, and just meeting with 3 or 4. And ultimately, it was a great business, a welding components manufacturer. We knew once we had our buyer stacker holdings, they really, I guess I identified them as a buyer because they listened. They heard me when I said, hey, here are sellers' concerns. Here are things that aren't important to seller. They really brought their whole, offer and deal structure wrapped around what I had shared was really important. And I felt like they listened, which was a good sign going forward. And ultimately, I'm still engaged and check in with both buyer and seller today. And they're both happy with the outcome. I believe it ultimately was a real, I always joke that a successful deal needs to be a win-lose, right? There's no such thing as a win-win or lose-lose for a successful deal. Each party has to feel like they won on some aspects, they lost on some aspects, but ultimately they won what was important to them. Maybe they lost on what was less important. And if both parties feel like they got a little and gave a little, then I'm happy.
All right. So that leads me really nicely into the fourth question I wanted to walk through with you, Shane. With some of your current or past sell-side clients, could you walk us through maybe 1 or 2 different trends, challenges, hurdles that you've experienced and how you might overcome them?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the couple of the biggest hurdles are always, the unknown and expectations and then, trying to align with seller and buyer and expectations. So, and then of course, nobody likes unknowns. Investors don't like unknown. And so, getting into a situation where a seller may not have disclosed, some important facts to you prior to going to market, and you're kind of learning them in real time, and you have to kind of pivot and adapt. And also just, making sure that you're presenting all full information to the parties so that there's no surprises. And, none of us can predict the future, right? And what economic conditions might be or what have you. So just kind of those unknown components are always a challenge, and you're always kind of waiting to, see what other shoe might drop. And then, of course, you have expectations. I think it's really important to be aligned with your seller when you go to market, and performing valuation and making sure that, expectations are aligned on both the advisor's part and the seller's part. Oftentimes we end up with clients who have been with another broker or had some, an advisor or a CPA give them some valuation guidance that wasn't true market guidance. And so when we walk them through our detailed process, our market methodology and the real understanding we have in the marketplace, because we're doing, 40, 50 deals a year, making sure that we explain that well, the hows and whys, and that we're aligned on that so that there aren't missteps down the line if we're expecting offers in a certain range, buyers expecting offers in that same or similar range. And then, hopefully we're building enough of a competitive process to get it to the peak of that range or the top of that range, but making sure there's not such a big gap that a deal can ultimately be consummated.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think specifically now with everything that's going on in the world, making sure that we're aligned and strategizing with sellers before we before we go out to market is becoming more and more important. So I think you nailed it there. What are the top 3 things or items, Shane, that you believe future sell-side prospects should consider when thinking about engaging a sell-side advisor like yourself?
Sure. I would say number one is call or email or reach out. I'm willing, and I know most caller advisors willing to just have no commitments needed. Just if you want to understand what the process might look like, what it means to really think about and undertake a process like selling your business. It's not something that you can just do. Let's grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk about it. I will give you the good, bad, and the ugly. And listen. I think that's really important. Give me an opportunity to listen, try to understand your goals, and then ultimately be honest with feedback saying, I think we can help you. And if we can't, whether myself or Calder can't, then oftentimes I can point you in the right direction of maybe someone who might be able to help, whether it's with some exit planning or another type of advisor that may be more appropriate for their needs. So it's just don't stall, reach out, have a conversation. There's never a commitment to move forward. I think educate yourself is one of the biggest things. Number 2, plan ahead. Kind of goes off of that a little bit, but our typical process these days is probably 8 to 10 months. Right, Garrett? So it's not like, it's March right now. Anything that we're just getting engaged on, starting valuation work, building out marketing materials and launching could very likely be a next year close. So, don't expect something's going to happen really quick. Don't wait until you wanted to retire last year and come to us. Let's have a conversation before, when you want to retire in 2 years, or when you maybe want to make a life change or move in a couple of years. So you make sure that you're getting kind of the best planning and support you need for the transition. And then, probably last but not least, don't try to time the market. I think that's an important one. I talk to too many sellers who are trying to find this perfect in the small business world. I don't think always bigger market dynamics play a role. And if you look at those historical multiples over years, right, you don't see major swings. Maybe outside of a COVID or a real true recession, but ultimately, if you have a good business and you have time, the market will come to you.
Well said, Shane. No, I appreciate all the insight and guidance. And I think the big overarching theme is making sure that, you pull yourself out of the business, have a conversation with a professional that does this day in and day out like yourself. Appreciate you joining us from Chicago and giving us some good insight here into your path and Calder and how maybe sell-side prospects and clients can interact with you. Appreciate everyone listening in, and we look forward to talking next time about some more sell-side tidbits and folks that are working with Calder.
Great to talk with you, Garrett.
Thanks, everyone. If you enjoy learning more about Calder Capital and our sell-side advisory practice, you can contact or find us on the details listed on the screen. We look forward to hearing from you soon.